OpenAI just released Operator, which automatically performs tasks for you inside of a browser. ChatGPT's already been doing amazing things to automate your workflows, but now this goes many steps further by letting the system actually perform those actions for you. Now, I have to tell you up front that unfortunately, this is only available on their $200 a month Pro plan and currently is only available in the US. So I apologize that many of you do not personally have access to this, but that's why I thought it might be helpful so that you can watch along and see what they're rolling out. So when we dive into Operator, you can see this actually has its own subdomain. It's operator.chatgpt.com. So this currently kind of operates in a different setting than ChatGPT itself, but my guess is these might get a little bit more merged together in the future. Inside of Operator, you can see that instead of just a text prompt area here, we've got lots of different categories, all filled with kind of high-end commercial activities. Things like reservations and food delivery, local services, shopping, travel. You can tell that there are really certain kinds of services that they're focusing on. In fact, if you go down into your settings, you can see there's a number of different websites where you can provide custom instructions for each of these sites. And it's quite the mashup of these. So you see a lot of booking and delivery services, a meme generator, some different travel sites and things like that. So you can kind of get a vibe of what kinds of activities they're looking at automating right away. Now, personally, I'm a little bit more invested on the business automation side of things, but let's go ahead and try something that's consumery, but maybe uses a couple different applications. I've always been interested in living in Washington State. I live in the frigid Midwest in the winter, and I always dream of living someplace else. So I sometimes want to do research on a place that I might want to dream about in the future. So I'm going to give it some instructions here. Find me houses in Bainbridge Island, Washington that are under $2 million, have at least 3 bedrooms, and were listed in the past week. And then instead of just leaving it at that, I want to do something with that information because I love researching and I want to add that information to a Google Sheet. So we're going to try to take that information and see how it processes that. So let's go ahead and execute this. Now, what's happening here is this is spinning up basically your own little virtual machine. It's got your own instance of a browser on here. And so you can see what activities it's doing. Now, to make this a little bit easier to see, I'm going to expand this. And hopefully you can see what's happening here. So I've got my prompts on the side. We can see what it's doing right now. It's selecting Zillow for property listings. Now, this is one of those things where this is finally feeling agentic. I didn't tell it to look on Zillow. In fact, I ran a similar prompt before I actually recorded this, and it used Trulia last time. So I don't know how it's making the decision to choose it, but this is what it's doing. So it went to Zillow. You can see right now, it's clicking as if it were an actual human to fill in those values. So I was kind of interested, behind the scenes, are they looking at the DOM to be able to see, what's happening in all the browser in the background to make this decision? But what it's doing is it's taking images, it's taking screenshots of what's happening on the screen, sending that back to the LLM to inform the decisions that it's making here. So it actually knows where to click on the screen because it's visualizing an image, a static image of what's happening to make that decision. Now, I'm kind of curious what's happening in the background because it put in no max and you can see it was kind of scrolling around for a while. So I think it was kind of trying to figure out, how do I input this value again? So you can see that there's some change happening now for the maximum, or at least we're trying to make that happen. Okay, so right now, I'm just catching you up to speed. Now it's trying to troubleshoot the dropdown. So already it's gotten stuck. When it ran it on Trulia, it was just like, boom, here we go. I put in the max price. But already on Zillow, we're having some issues. And I don't know if that's because they have kind of bot detection on Zillow. And so maybe they're trying to obfuscate it and make it more difficult. But it's kind of interesting to see as it's trying to sort through, how do I click that value here to choose that maximum amount? Okay, so this is funny. I think what ended up happening is on Zillow, that listing for the price has a drop down. And so you can't just enter in any value you want. It's probably like 2.5 million. And so I think it ended up just skipping that. I'm going to see what it did for a second. And so if I ever want to, I can go ahead and actually take control from what's happening on the screen. So let me go ahead and click the button to take control. You can see now it's passing over the control to me so I can make changes. Now, the only time I've had to do this already in my testing is when I was doing things like authentication. So if I have to get into my Google Drive account to be able to have that Google Sheet, well, then I can authenticate it. Now, it's going to actually store that session for you so you don't have to keep authenticating. And if you're doing things, of course, like meal delivery, of course, you're going to need to actually log in. Some activities you do when you're logged out. Okay, so let's see if I can click around here to make a difference. So let's check on that price. You can see when I click on it, it kind of is detecting that it's a clickable element. Again, it's still taking those screenshots that are happening in the background. So let's see if my hypothesis was correct. We can see if I scroll down a little bit here, we've got these values and so it did not actually interpret my 2 million as 2M. It was taking the text, the string that I put pretty literally here. Now I'm curious, can I type in my own value? I can. It looks like, I can do that. So it could be very specific, 20.4 million if I wanted to. So that's interesting. So it already got caught up here. It wasn't able to do it, but let's not give it too much grief. Let's go ahead and help it out. And we'll just key in the value of 2 million ourselves. And then it was going with the bedrooms at this point. And I'm going to give back control now for it to continue to do this process. So we'll finish up, and it's always trying to get feedback from you. So it's asking, hey, what did you change? Because it's always trying to learn and get a little bit better. But I'm just going to return that control without any feedback, and we'll let it continue on its own. Okay, so now it's opening up a new tab, and presumably I'm guessing it's going to go to Google Drive to try to do something, but let's see what happens next. Okay, so right now in the process, it's opening up each listing. It's copying the URL, and I don't know if it's actually storing that in memory, so it's going to have all of this detail that it can add to my Google Sheet at one time. I kind of feel like it's just stuck in a loop where it's really hyper fixating on the URL itself and isn't going to actually give me the data that I need, but I'm not exactly sure. The next step is it decided to use Bing.com to be able to look up Google Sheets. I found it interesting that it doesn't know some of these URLs in its own memory. It has to actually search for that using a search engine, which seems kind of unique given that it's ChatGPT and can't figure that out itself. Okay, so this is interesting. The site can't be reached. And I'm not sure why that is. Okay, I refreshed it. So we're still good to go. So at this point, it says I access Google Sheets, but it requires a sign in to create a new sheet. So we're going to help it out here. We're going to take back over control. And so I'll handle the authentication piece. We'll go to the sign in. Now I've finished authenticating. So let's go ahead and finish up and give back control to operator. So it's creating a new spreadsheet on our behalf. And we can see it's starting to define the relevant columns that we need to keep track of. And you can see it's starting to input those values. So it did seem to save it in memory without having to actually go back and forth between every listing and update those values. But it is going column by column with everything. And so it's not just injecting those records, or it didn't have it pre-formatted in a tabular format that it can just insert it. So this is something that's going to take a little bit. Now, I don't want to make you sit and endure this with me as I'm doing it in real time, but it's been over a minute that it's trying to enter the second listing details into row 3. So I'm guessing that it just took the most recent listing, and now it's trying to figure out how to navigate this. So this, my friends, is definitely not a fast process. This is something that a human would actually be doing much faster in real time, even if you were manually copying and pasting those values yourself. And that's what I find kind of interesting, because I look through the examples that they have on the website and I'm thinking, yeah, if I'm reserving a table, and sure, I need to add some filters to it and I need to find the kind of restaurant I'm looking for, that's something that doesn't take me that long. It's the decision-making process when I'm talking to my wife and we're trying to figure out what we want for dinner. That's what takes the time. Actually pulling up the website and putting in a booking, that doesn't seem to take a whole lot of time to me. So again, this is a research project or research lab that they call it. So I understand that this will definitely be improving over time, but this is something that I found in almost all of my experiments is just that it takes a long time to be able to get what you're looking for. In fact, it probably takes more time than had you done it manually yourself. Okay, just to update you, we skipped ahead a little bit. It is entering the listing information for the next listing. And I didn't actually see it in the UI. Go click a tab back inside of Zillow. So I don't know if it already had it in the clipboard memory and it just didn't really understand how to access it or which one to be able to do. So it was able to pull it. And now the third listing we can see is happening great in real time. So somehow is doing kind of a repair process to be able to understand how to get access to that information. And once it did it, now it's operating much faster than it was before. Okay, and it's complete. So it says it found 3 listings for us and it gave us a link. So let's see if we can open this up directly. And great, so I'm already authenticated, pulled me to that listing data itself, and we should be able to click any of those links to be able to do our own research. Although, of course, as we find this did not work out for the URL. So there's probably some pieces that we have to look at here. I'm not sure if this is something they do for spoofing and you have to click on the share link button instead. So I'll diagnose that at a different point. But for the most part, we're able to get the data that we want, including the address and the information on price and the baths and bedrooms. Now, a couple other things you might be interested in those settings in the lower left-hand corner is that you've got saved tasks and you can create tasks with instructions and give it a URL. Now, I'm a little bit confused about what this is trying to do. I had this whole conversation back and forth, and I said, hey, now that we've got ChatGPT tasks, can I connect tasks to my listings data so I could say once a week or once every day, I want to be able to run this action? And it said, sure, we can do that. And I said, great, let's go ahead and do it. And then it wasn't able to actually interact between the two. But then here we've got tasks, but they don't seem connected to the ChatGPT tasks. So I think we'll see this emerge a little bit over the next coming weeks. Now, another thing to be aware is under privacy, you can improve the model for everyone, which basically means you're sharing some of this data with it. And you can turn off that setting, which actually happens on the ChatGPT side of the house, to be able to turn off improving the model for everybody if you want to keep that more private. We can also manage our browsing data, and we can delete and log out of all sites. We can manage site-specific data for the sites that we've already logged into. And finally, you can delete all of those chats historically if you want to as well. Now, a couple other tests that I did that were pretty much failures, and I don't want to waste your time, but we do a lot of work inside of Airtable. And so I said, hey, I want to go ahead and automatically create some tables with metadata and data and all this kind of stuff. And Airtable's actually got a really good tool that does it on its own co-pilot kind of tool. But I said, hey, let's go ahead and do it with Operator. Now, it was able to create a base. It created the tables that I wanted. It gave it specific names to. And then I told it just to add and populate its own fields that it thought it needed. So for contacts, it added email and phone number and address. But the thing you'll notice is that none of these actually use their correct field types according to Airtable. So for example, email itself shouldn't be a single line of text. It should be an actual email field. If we search for that, we've got a specific email field. So it was doing this, plus just to be able to create 3 tables, it took probably about 15 minutes to do it. And so I just thought, this isn't worth actually showing this example because it's not going to be practical in real life. The other example that I thought you'd get a kick out of is I know a lot of people try to make thumbnails a certain style, and I'm terrible at editing thumbnails. And so I was like, okay, take Alex Hermosi and take one of his thumbnails, and let's go to Canva and see what we can create. And specifically in the documentation or in the intro message for what Operator is, it has some specific messaging around don't do anything with a complex canvas. Like you want to have really apparent buttons that can be clicked and elements that can be selected. And so doing something like using a canvas on Canva is a really bad idea. So ironically, it took this, it recognized my failures, and I think this is very aptly named. It created something called My Failures, and this is what we got out of it. So this is my really awesome thumbnail. Again, this took probably 20 minutes to get this far. It got really excited about adding a background, which it later deleted, that it wanted to look like a spreadsheet, which was just green blotches in the background. It deleted it, and then it spent all this time just centering a piece of text. So again, another failure that you definitely don't want to go down that alley. So from my perspective, sure, you can reserve tables and order food and have it tell you a recipe. But again, are you going to get that much value from it? I don't know. You decide. The other thing I guess I want to warn you about is, it says you can do stuff like market research, which you absolutely can. I mean, think of this as like the world's slowest intern right now. Cool. I find the data, I copy that data, I paste that data, I give you the data. But if you were hoping to do like a mass outbound campaign and you want to do lots of data enrichment and scrape lots of websites and pull the data and ingest stuff, I wouldn't even go down that road at this point. And the other part you should be aware of is that, remember, it's actually authenticating you into stuff. This isn't managing proxies on your behalf. You're not going to be able to scrape Google results in bulk because its proxy detection is still going to mess with you because you're just running this single instance of this machine. And so I really wouldn't recommend any of these more complex business lead generation type use cases if that's something you were thinking about. Okay, so in this video, I know we talked about the realities of what this is today and that, maybe it doesn't quite perform up to my expectations of what I think this product would look like. But you got to admit, this is pretty cool in terms of it actually having agentic behavior now, meaning that I can just give it a normal person instruction as I would someone on my team, an intern or someone, and say, hey, I want you to look up this information and I want you to do something with it. And I don't have to specifically say, go use this website and here's how you do it. And here's where you need to click because it's making all of those decisions on its own. And so I know that the speed is going to improve. And I know that the more training data that they get, we're going to see this really evolve over time. So I'm really encouraged. I'm really excited about where it's going. Is this something that's mind blowing and going to change the world today? No, but just the pace of their development is really promising to be able to see. And so I'm excited where even this operator feature is going to be 6 months from now. Hey, I'm Dan Lehman, and if you have a business that needs automating, don't hesitate to reach out to our website at automationhelpers.com, where we're offering free 30-minute consultations.